Good day and welcome back to another DB Legends video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at how the red Gohan unit performs in DB Legends after his release in the game. Now obviously this is another Gohan from the superhero movie, and we'll be taking a look at my build in terms of gear as well as just in general how I feel you're best utilizing the unit. Now Gohan is a very good character. He's very strong, a support type unit, so someone that can help out your team quite significantly. And yeah, I would say overall he's a very nice option that you can definitely consider when you're looking at kind of improving your team. He's kind of like a, I don't want to say direct improvement on Pan, but if you've had the red Pan, then Gohan's somewhat similar in design without being too overtly different in design, if that makes any sense. But yeah, Gohan is really solid and brings some really cool abilities to the table. So obviously the first thing he does is he has his special move, burst combo, which allows him to essentially restore his whole hand as well as improve his vanishing gauge. Always something I find pretty helpful in PvP combat is vanishing gauge management. It's obviously one of the easier methods of avoiding the opposition's attacks and being able to refresh it at the end of a combo. If your opponent is not wary of your character's abilities, always tends to catch people by surprise. He then also has his special skill, again something that's pretty useful. Randomly draws at most 2 cards when you have 3 or fewer, so another way to reset your hand, whilst also cancelling abnormal conditions and giving increased damage to allies, which is pretty good, considering the fact that he has the ability to rapidly restore or reduce the substitution time accounts of your allies as well, whilst also inflicting some debuffs on the opposition. He also, of course, has some pretty cool unique abilities, with the ability to obviously inflict quite sizable attribute downgrades on the opposition, which is always something that's appreciated. And beyond that as well, he also has the ability to increase the amount of damage and buffs that he obtains by the amount of times that he has actually appeared within the game, within the amount of times he's switched in, switched out, which is always pretty cool. I find that when you especially have units that reduce substitution time accounts, this is a very potent ability that if you use correctly can do quite a lot of good work. Yeah, at least from my perspective. Of course, I would say beyond that, there's not too much that you need to be aware of, at least when it comes to his abilities. Managing that switching in and out is going to be very important, plus the fact that he shortens substitution time accounts when he performs certain abilities. So understanding all of that altogether is always going to be something that is crucial to the performance of the unit, as well as of course also just the performance of the team with him on it. But yeah, I would say he's usable. Very similar to Pan, just doesn't have her main abilities and her main ability nullification. So a big thing with Pan is she also shortens substitution time accounts, but Pan has the ability to cancel the opposition's usage of their main abilities, kind of lock them in place a little bit, which is very helpful. So it is quite a big differentiating factor without being too obtuse and too crucially different. One thing that's important to note is that you can actually run both of them and have them kind of act to pseudo supercharge a third unit, which is pretty cool. Essentially you can run both of them both have access to the same Zenkai boosts, and essentially pseudo supercharge basically the third unit with quite a lot of buffs, between Pan, between Gohan. Essentially just have a huge buff party and really boost up the other units, whilst also boosting each other up, which is also pretty cool with the whole father-daughter thing. So I think they don't really fight each other for a position on the team, although obviously with them both being red, you do want to be considerate at least a tiny bit of whether they are functional together. But yeah, I would say Gohan is a pretty solid unit. I've used him in a couple situations, and I think he has probably the nicer kit of the general banner units that came out with part 2. I wouldn't say he's as good as maybe Sparking Jiren was, but I would definitely say he's a lot of fun to use. He does really feel like a consistent support unit for me, and one that I would suggest you place onto almost any team overall. I would say it's definitely a very, very, very good functionality, and that he does a fantastic job in just enabling so many different components of all the other teams. And I think that's definitely something that Gohan does that, you know, is good. Obviously, you know, the big question is how do red characters do in the meta? I think right now he's okay. There's not too obtuse a blue unit, at least for the time being. Obviously his big counter is Beast Gohan, but you also would tend to place him on teams with Beast Gohan, so whether that's a counter or not, I don't know. But yeah, obviously that's kind of a big, you know, counter specific unit. One thing is that you can kind of run him, Legends Limited Piccolo and Legends Limited Gohan all on the same team, which for me is pretty fun and pretty cool, and obviously just enables you to have a pretty fun little time with those two units. Of course, you know, it's going to depend on how you feel. It's not always so easy to run like a support unit strictly like Gohan, but I think he can do enough damage and has enough flexibility, and the fact that he can really boost the opposition or debuff the opposition whilst also enabling you to reasonably have good access to your top tier units is really, really solid. And I think, like I said, it's kind of fun to run him and Pan together, although I know it's maybe not the most ideal. I find it to be a really fun little rotation. It just kind of really lets you just have like Beast Gohan pop in and out, do big damage, and then leave, which is kind of a lot of fun to do, at least from my perspective. It's really, really fun to have that situation, but you can do that with quite a few units. That's what makes them really, really good. Is he top tier? No, obviously he's a banner sparking, so there's always going to be a limitation to a certain degree on how good he can be, but I will say that he's a surprisingly good addition, and considering how good the superhero team was and that he was a red, I was kind of concerned that there wouldn't be a reason to find a space for him, but he's definitely very good. And if you don't have Pan at all, he is obviously a great option. If you do have Pan, I still think he's probably up there as an option. I do think he's very, very good. And yeah, I think in general he can do a very good job for you. So beyond that, I think overall you should consider using him. I think he did great in that fight we've just seen now. I think he showcased a lot of what makes him really, really solid, and his tankiness is fairly decent as well. One thing that's really nice is the fact that he seals enemy strike cards when he gets switched to standby. I think that's very good. He also obviously as well increases your ally damage. So when you combine that alongside with his abilities, you know, to do like solid damage, his abilities to, you know, essentially like just have very, very good performance, and the fact that he's increasing ally damage. I mean, you can drop his main ability, his green card, and switch him to standby, and I think you're getting like a 40 or 50% boost to ally damage, whilst also significantly debuffing the opposition, which I think is not something you can just toss to the side. I think it's definitely a very good performance by him as a unit, and something that I would at least softly ask you to consider in his favor. I definitely think it's a huge kind of boost towards him as a unit, to obviously be able to, for the most part, function quite heavily in terms of being this good enabler for your other units, whilst also not gimping himself so much. When he's defeated, he also boosts the rest of the team, So it's very, very good. He's like an all-package unit. You can use him to switch in for rising rushes as well. You know, that ability to boost the rest of your team gives you an excuse to throw him as rising rush fodder. So there's never really a overtly negative reason for using him. Like every single situational use of him is pretty good without being something that's going to detract from the way you play with your team, which I think is good. Whenever a unit doesn't ostensibly require you to change how you play with other units to facilitate him, it's good. Maybe the only thing you can say is that he might want you to switch in a bit more, switch in and out, but that's never a huge issue, I find. In terms of gameplay, players don't really mind switching in and out, so yeah, I would say overall he's in a good spot. Like I said, he's not maybe the craziest unit. He's not Jiren. I feel like Jiren was an exception to the rule more so than anything else. But I think as an enabler and a support unit, I think he's a unit that has a really solid space in the current meta and with the current teams. I think that's something you always have to factor in. And yeah, finds his place on the superhero team quite well. He can be Zenkai boosted, as you're seeing me do right now, with the Great Saiyaman 1 and 2, which is great. And you can see here, using the burst rush, that vanishing gauge refresh just really helps us in terms of our performance. So yeah, I would say, honestly speaking, he's just a super duper solid unit. Yeah, I think for me, for the most part, he's just in a situation whereby I find him to be an enjoyable unit to use, and he helps me facilitate using like my Beast Gohan. He helps me facilitate using my Piccolo, and these are good things for me. I like it when I can use my top tier units without feeling restricted, and I feel like the ability to do so is something that's very, very good overall. So yeah, I would say beyond that, feel free to use Gohan however you wish. If you do have him, I suggest using him. He's definitely very solid. I don't think he needs a Zenkai boost to be solid. Although he can do decent damage and be relatively tanky, I think a big appeal of him is that ability to allow and enable you to really just switch in whoever you want, whenever you want, and however you want. And I think that, for me, is the peak of his design. But yeah, see you guys next time. Bye.